Okay, this is a tutorial video on how to replace the front brake pads and rotors for the 2012 Volvo S60. Here it is. Here it says S60. My lighting isn't all that great, but you can see right here where it says S60. This is the S60 T5 model. Again, my lighting isn't all that great, but it's good enough for you to see what we're dealing with. All right, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, we know what we're dealing with, let's begin. As you can see, this is our brake caliper for this particular 2012 Volvo S60. And I'm pointing this out for a reason. Take note of the style of the caliper. Notice that it kind of envelops the entire brake assembly, kind of a big sheet of cast iron, if you will. The reason I'm pointing that out to you is because I have been told by the people down at the auto parts store, when looking the part up, there evidently are two types of brake calipers for the 2012 Volvo S60. The other type looks a little more cylindrical than this does. The brake caliper on the passenger side, which is what this is, what the side we're looking at here, is not the same as the brake caliper on the driver's side. And this is what they tell me. The good news about this car we're working on today, this caliper you're looking at is identical on the other side as well, the driver's side. Note where I've got my jack stand. This is a piece of the metallic part of the frame of the vehicle, and you want to be careful about where you place your jack stands. You want to make sure that your jack stands are in a secure metallic part, something that's a part of the frame. All right, now we're on the back side of the passenger side caliper we just finished looking at. And the first thing I want to point out to you guys is that you're going to need two types of bits. The first is a T55 5-star pointed torque bit is what you're going to need. And you're also going to need an Allen bit, 7mm Allen bit. Okay. Now, the torque bolts. So there's one here, another one on top of it, one here on the bottom, and another one on top of that. Those are the torque bits. There are 4 of those that you need to remove. Then you've got this covered little cylindrical thing. If I move that cover there, you see the hole where the Allen nut, or rather the Allen bit, is going to go down into that hole to screw out the Allen bolt or Allen nut. And then there's another one on top here where you see my finger. So one Allen nut here, one Allen nut there, and then the 4 torque bits. All right, so we've pretty much backed everything off in terms of the bolts. As you can see, I've removed this one, and I saved this one for you all so you can see how, you know, it fits into the torque nut like that. And I've already used my ratchet so that you cannot do this with your bare hands, y'all. So I don't want to give a false impression. This is the 1/2-inch drive ratchet that I attached my bit to in order to loosen the torque nut. And that's what I'm doing now. Loosening it up and taking it out. And here they all are. All four of them, they look like that. Allens, they don't come out. They just back out. But when we take the caliper apart, you'll be able to see more. Anyway, while I'm here, I want you all to take note of two bolts that will play a role later when we take off the rotors. But notice this bolt, and then there's another one like it on top there. You're going to need to remove those in order to take off the harness that the caliper sits on. Yeah, there goes the one on the top. I got more light on it now. That one up there, and this one down here. So when I refer to those back bolts, when we get to removing the rotor, the disc, then you'll know that's what I was referring to. All right, guys, so this is the caliper here. Pull this apart. First thing we do is take off this back part here. And you see that we've got the two Allen bolts here on the opposite side of where we just were. And like I said, they're not going to back off. They're not going to come out from the other side where we were. You're going to need to push these out on this end. And this isn't necessary to take the caliper off, but what you want to do is take these out so that you can clean them. You want to clean them and oil them, because these are like pinions that move back and forth as the caliper is doing its job. So this will be a good opportunity to clean them off and put a wire brush to them, and then put some bearing grease on them, all-purpose grease, and lubricate them real well before placing them back in. Okay, next we're going to take off the front side of the caliper. Now when you look here, you see this metallic sheet. This, on some brake calipers, on some cars, they use these pins that help keep the caliper in place. This is in place of that pin. This little piece here, I don't even know what to call it, but just all you need to do is get you I have a big screwdriver here that I'm gonna take, and you can just pry that off, and then that loosens up the front side of the caliper, and you just pull that off, and then you can see there is the outer brake pad right here. And as you can see, my wear isn't as bad as some I've seen. I do not have metal scratching against metal. However, you can see that I've got grooves here in my rotor, in my disc. They're a little bit warped here, so we're definitely going to take these out to a machine shop, or some auto parts stores offer the service of doing what we call turning the rotors, which is really a term used to describe resurfacing them, smoothing them out. This bracket, remember those big bolts on the back I showed you? One is right here, and then the other is down here on the bottom. We're going to need to back those bolts out in order to remove this harness. This is the caliper harness. Got to get this out of the way so that we can get to the disc. You're going to need either 19 millimeter, or what I use is a 3/4 inch socket. So either or, 19 millimeter socket, or 3/4 inch socket, and you're just going to take them to the back. Now I've already taken them off, loosened them up, but you're gonna, I've already done the work, but I'm just showing you all. This is the top one, the top bolt that I'm trying to get off. And now it's loose enough so I can just use my fingers. I've already loosened the bottom one, but I left this here so you all could see for yourself. And then the harness will come right off. Okay, so to take off the rotor, you're going to need to remove another torque nut. The rotor torque nut is different though than the torque nuts on the back. Those were T55s. This one for the rotor is a T50 torque bit that you're going to need. This is the T50 torque bit, and I've got it on my my 1/2-inch ratchet here. And if you notice, I reinstalled 2 of the lug nuts because I'm going to need to use them for leverage. So I'm going to use them as for leverage against one another. And there we go. We'll already feel it moving. Oh, you could just use one. Look, I'm just using one lug nut down there on the bottom, and using the hub of the rotor to use as leverage. So either or, whatever's clever. Just know you're going to need leverage to get this out here. Okay, let's see if that'll come out with my hand. Yep, that comes out. We get that out of the way, and then our lug nuts need to come off. So we back those off. Okay, and you need to get you a big hammer because that disc is probably going to be stubborn about coming off. So you need to get you one of these big heavy hammers like this, and if you hit the rotor a couple of times, it should jaw loose. It comes loose just slightly like that. Alright, so as you can see, the rotor's off, and as I said before, I'm going to take mine to a machine shop or auto parts shop and have them resurface it. Otherwise, I would not have used the bare hammer like this against the bare rotor. But because I know I'm having it resurfaced, I knew it wasn't really a big deal. But if you're doing a job, for example, if you're changing out your CV joint axles, which would require you to remove the disc, I would suggest, putting a cloth or some type of protective padding over it prior to hitting it with the hammer, so that you don't mess up your rotors. And that's assuming, in that scenario, we're talking about good rotors. If they're smooth and they're in good shape, you don't want to put a hammer to them. All right, here now is where we go back and see about cleaning those pins, those Allen bolts, pins. Here's the caliper, the part that was on the inside, not facing us on camera, but on the inside. This is the brake caliper, and for future reference, so you know what I'm talking about, this cylindrical object here, for those who don't know, is called a caliper piston, and we're going to need to push this back using a C-clamp, and I'll explain what that is a little later. But right now what we want to do is we want to push out these pins. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get some of this stuff here. It's called Brake Clean. Okay, there's the brand name and everything you need to know about getting that. You can get that at any auto parts store. And we're going to spray some of it on this to clean this up a bit, and then we're going to take a wire brush after spraying it, put a wire brush to it and try to clean that up a bit. Okay, with the wire brush. And that brake clean is really strong. It's a real strong chemical that will make the job much easier for you to do because the stuff comes right off. I strongly suggest as you do this job that you do them one at a time so that you don't confuse yourself as to trying to remember which way they go back in. All right, so now you can see that is a big improvement on what it looked like before. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this. You can get some of this stuff at the auto parts store. It's like a grease bucket, basically, is what it is. And so we're going to do, you open it up, looks like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dip this in there like that. You know, turn it around in there a little bit like that. Dip it in. Okay. And then I'm just going to grease it up real well. So I get all that greased and lubricated. And then I go back to the caliper up here. On the back end of it, I push this back in through the piston, and I see that it moves much more freely now because it's been lubricated. And that's what you want to do because, you know, as the brake piston is moving, going throughout its normal operation, these move too. So you want to make sure that they're lubricated well now that you have the chance to get to them. All right, so now we need to get this piston pushed back in to the into the caliper. Different people do or try different things, but one of the most popular things to do is to take the old brake pad. These are the old brake pads. Now this is an old one, not the new ones you're about to put on. That inner pad is what this is. This inner brake pad, you're going to put back in that hole like that. You're going to get a C-clamp. And this is a C-clamp. This is what one looks like. Okay, as you can see, it's like a vice grip type of device, and it's shaped like the letter C, which is why we call it a C-clamp. I took out just enough room here to get it to fit right over the caliper, just like this. We want to tighten it back up so that it comes down evenly on both sides. And what you're going to do is just going to keep on twisting this little handle here that I got on the end. Y'all can see this little handle that I'm turning on the end. And as I twist it, you can see for yourself the piston is going back in to the caliper as I slowly turn. It's going in, and you keep on pushing it down against that old brake pad until it's all the way back in there. You're going to need the caliper to fit over those new pads. And it's not going to fit over those new pads if you don't push the piston back in. So that is the science, or the logic rather, behind getting that piston back into the caliper. So there we have it. You see the piston is back in. And let me take this opportunity also now to say and to share with those who may not know, but this is a front brake job we're doing for the Volvo S60 2012 year model. The rear brakes are totally different from the front. Doing the rear brakes is a lot more complicated than what we're doing here today. Next is to put everything back together, put pads on and all that good stuff. Alright, the next thing is to put the disc or the rotor. The term rotor and disc are synonymous. Back on to the hub. And as I told you all, I was sending mine out to get resurfaced. And as you can see, they look great. Looks like a totally different rotor, doesn't it? Brand spanking shiny new. Be careful not to confuse the hole for the torque nut with the holes for the lug nuts, because it's easy to do. What you want to do is take this torque nut and you want to place it over the disc like this, okay, and then kind of feel your way around to find the hole, and then kind of twist it in there into this screw where it belongs, and then that kind of helps to line it up to where it needs to be. So find the bit to help you to do that. And we want to get our ratchet out to help us nail this down. Not literally nail it down, but you know what I mean. Get it down in the right spot, in the right place. Now, mind you, this needs to be secured, you know, but it doesn't have to be over tightened, because remember, these are the holes for the lug nuts that keep the tire on, and trust me, they're gonna keep that rotor on there. This little security nut here, or bolt here, really, to be honest with you, in my opinion, it's superfluous. Okay, so now we're putting this harness back into place. This is what we took off with those huge 19mm 3/4 inch bolts. And we use a 3/4 inch socket to take off before. And I remember having a rough time getting them off. You know, they were like rusted on there really pretty badly. So what I'm going to do is take some of this WD-40 and I'm going to spray the bolt down with some of that WD-40 just to kind of lubricate it and clean it off a little bit. So I get the thread started, and then I'm ready to screw it back on there. Alright, so I got my 3/4 inch socket and my ratchet, and I'm just gonna go ahead and finish tightening the bolt back in. Okay, we got the one on the bottom already done off camera when you guys weren't looking. So hit the top one. Okay, make sure that's in there securely in there, and now might be a good time to just kind of wipe the disc down a little bit. I mean, it really doesn't make a difference because all of this stuff is gonna burn away anyway. So it doesn't really matter, but I guess it just kind of looks better. So we go ahead and just wipe things down. And now we're ready for the caliper. The first thing we want to do is put the pads in place. That's the outer pad. And then The inner pad is going to go in on the other side. Now, one of the things I like to do to help ensure nice, smooth, and quiet stops is I like to take some of this stuff called the disc brake quiet. It's spray adhesive, and I shake it up, and I put a little bit on the back of the pad. Not too much, just enough to kind of, yeah, see, I don't overspray it all. Just put a little bit there, put a coating onto the back of the pad, and I'll do the same thing on the other side as well, because when you hear brakes squealing and making noise, a lot of the times that's because the pads are moving around. All right, first thing you want to do when putting on the back side of the piston, or the caliper rather, is to secure those Allens, those slide rods, the Allen wrench nuts. So you want to go ahead and secure those first. You can see here, I've got the back end of the caliper in place. Remember those covers, that little plastic covers that were over those Allen pins, nuts, slides, whatever you want to call them. So we snap those back before we forget. All right, so now we're putting our finishing touches on the back end of the caliper with our T55 torque bit again, to make sure that we've got everything nice and tight the way it's supposed to be. And as you can see, I put the caps back on to my my Allen rods, and everything back here looks pretty much the way it looked before we took everything apart. That 19mm or 3/4 inch bolt you see is back in place, holding the caliper harness in place. And there's only one last thing left to do, and that's to slap on the front pins, and that's it. All right, so I called it a pin. We just need to snap that back in place. I've got the top part here in place on the middle part, so I saved this for you all. Just going to take a screwdriver and snap that into place there. That's back where it should be. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So there you have it. And I would imagine the T6 or whatever other versions of the S60 they have, I would imagine it's pretty much the same. So good luck, guys. You do it yourselfers. It's really not that big of a deal. And I hope this video was helpful. Thanks. Bye-bye.